Alright, we are recording for chapter 13, and I'm actually not sure. Maybe this won't trigger as many rants as I was thinking from last video, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so this is we're following Obi-Wan. He is at the Jedi Temple, looking at the archives to look up Kamino, finding it's missing and all that. Before getting to that, though, he is looking at one of the Jedi bus. This has been mentioned previously that they have busts of some of them, former masters, because perhaps by just looking at them, you can gain some insight into them, and from that, improve yourself. This particular bust is of Dooku, which seems rather confusing, seeing as how he left. He didn't die, he left. Potentially in some ways would be considered a traitor. Why would you keep that around? Obi-Wan describes it having an intensity to it that he recognizes as Qui-Gon having. It's the intensity of basically being a champion for causes that the Jedi Council would not necessarily agree with. But he says that a difference between them, even though he never knew Dooku, Qui-Gon could turn that off at times, Dooku could not. He never knew Dooku. There's also, curiously, no mention of Dooku training Qui-Gon, which I think that is at least mentioned in the movie when Dooku is holding Obi-Wan. So yeah, it still is just, I don't know, it's a little curious. I mean, the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon, as far as Obi-Wan is concerned, the whole recognizing something in them both is interesting. But it still seems curious that the bust is there. He then, the chief archivist comes up, and it's interesting because she actually explains, and she is the one who has the whole, if it's not in the archives, it does not exist line. That's a little later, but she explains that Dooku left because he did not believe that the Jedi should be serving the politicians as they are, because they can be corrupt. And let me actually see. Is it? No, it's early. In the end, I think he left because he lost faith in the Republic. He believed that politics were corrupt. Now, one thing interesting about that, they could have written in, Obi-Wan also feels that way. That he believes that all politicians are in some way corrupt because their only interest is selfish. So that is actually interesting that there isn't, hey, remember this? That Obi-Wan kind of feels the same way. But at least it does explain one thing. Because Obi-Wan does actually think prior to that, whatever problems Dooku must have seen, he should have recognized that he could better repair them by remaining within the Jedi family. Obi-Wan is thinking to himself, well, no. Because if he believes that lost faith in the Republic and believed that politics was corrupt, Richard did specifically, and felt that the Jedi betrayed themselves by serving the politicians, that's something that you can't repair from within. His feeling would be that the Jedi Order itself is mistaken in its allegiance, I guess is the way to put it. And not necessarily to the public, but that to the politicians. So yes, actually, he would have to leave. Again, this is not something stated in there, but it is true. It is true. In a situation like that, that kind of fundamental disagreement is that you have to leave. It would be an irreconcilable difference without the Jedi Order completely changing. But if he stays in it, then the Jedi Order is still being served. So that's not going to disrupt things, that's not going to bring about any change. Versus him leaving, at least it stresses the significance of it to him. So potentially they would think about it, maybe reform. Or potentially if he left and brought others with him, could try to form a new Jedi Order that would have identical teachings, but would be independent completely. Which would actually then make more sense with the Separatist stuff. But again, we don't understand anything about the Separatists because we've not been told anything. So one thing curious. Okay, so Obi-Wan has asked Jocasta Nu, by the way, is the name of the archivist, to try to find Kamino. It's not there. Are you sure it exists? Absolutely. Let me do a gravitational scan. She said as much to herself as to Obi-Wan. There are some inconsistencies here. Maybe the planet you're seeking was destroyed. I don't know how that works. But anyway, wouldn't that be on the record? It ought to be, unless it was very recent. You found inconsistencies, and it's like, oh, no, it must be that. Gravity doesn't work that way. That the planet being destroyed, it would have to be removed. The mass itself would have to be removed. What about the star, which there's nothing in Star Wars to suggest a star can be destroyed. I mean, technically, if you want to count the sequel trilogy, I'm not counting that. It also seems odd. It's like discovers that, and it's where Kamino is supposed to be. So it's like, well, must just be that Kamino doesn't exist. It's also weird because of how it describes it. It ought to be, unless it was very recent. So you have your data on the gravity is newer than your data on the planets. But it's also, how does that make any sense? Because you'd think if it were destroyed, then and somehow that erased the gravity, then the gravity being there means the planet must be there. I mean, it is all backwards. It makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, and then, we do get, the whole with the younglings, even they mention, if the planet blew up, the gravity, if the planet, wait, no. If the planet blew up, the gravity would go away. No, wouldn't. That's not how that works. So actually, no, the younglings do it wrong as well. Silly putty. This is mass, therefore it has gravity. That gravity is felt at a certain level over here based on the distance between them. I don't feel like actually breaking the silly putty apart, but spread out, so it is exploded. Let's assume that the distance between it and my finger is the same. The gravity my finger feels from the silly putty is identical, because it's irrelevant, the shape here. All that's relevant is that all the mass is over here. Okay? It can be spread out. In fact, it could even reach so far over towards my finger. So long as it doesn't start crossing, it's still going to be the same amount of gravity. So putting it another way, if the star even went supernova, destroying that system and producing a nebula, the nebula will still have the same mass as the system that was destroyed. Technically a little bit less because of the supernova will involve some amount of conversion from matter to energy. We're going to set that aside for the moment because that is not going to be anywhere near on the order of the system disappearing. The mass is still there. The gravity of it is still there. This is not that complicated of science. Yeah. So I have that. The younglings doing the lightsaber training are described as being 4 or 5 years old at the time. So just the whole, yes, they are child soldiers. They are. There's also a mention, and I'm not sure. Okay. As I recall in the movie, there is a mention or the name of who placed the order for the clone army. I don't remember what that name is. I also don't remember I feel like at some point I had heard, like 2 years prior, like just a few years prior. Well, that wouldn't jive with how old how old Boba is. Boba Fett is 10 years old, about. So that's about when the clones were first being made. So, okay. And it was mentioned that Dooku had left about 9-10 years ago. So that would seem to suggest that it was Dooku who actually could have ordered... Well, the Dooku's the one who removed Kamino from the database. The only reason you'd remove Kamino from the database would be to protect the clone army being made there. But even then, that doesn't work for other reasons. But it's like, Dooku isn't aware of the clone army, it seems. Because if he was, you'd think he would just go and claim it, so that it wouldn't be a threat to the Separatists. And it doesn't seem likely that 10 years prior, Palpatine, a politician, would have been able to convince Dooku to do something like... None of this makes any sense. And there's also the whole... It makes no sense that the Jedi archivists would be like, well, no, we are the ultimate authority on this knowledge. It's like, no, I think that the shippers, the traders that have to pilot around those systems would actually know the systems better than you, because they need to. You're just here with books. They're there trying to pilot around these things and to these things. Because it would also make sense that Camino would have transports visiting there. You know, people may be coming and going. Because, I mean, it's like, are we to believe that they only have the one cloning facility that is completely dedicated to this army? There's no other cloning going on? I mean, if they can be hired, do you think anyone would... Others would be hiring them, so the knowledge of them would be there. I mean, Dexter knows. And he even mentions about how, you know, when you're dealings with them, it's like, they'll like you if you're polite and you got money. So clearly they do clone as a business. So it's... In the movie, you can get away with some more suspension of disbelief, because potentially we're talking about like 10 minutes have passed for all these revelations concerning Camino. More than 10 minutes. More than 10 pages in this thing, even. So, yeah, you kind of need this stuff answered. Kind of need to have it make sense. Now, I'm not saying that we need to know that it was Dooku. No. I just mean the whole... You can't just be like, oh, well, Camino's erased from the records, therefore they don't know, and we just leave it at that. It's like, well, no, there's people, like Dexter has his own memory of it. Not that he necessarily visited there, but he is aware of it, and there'd be many other people that would be aware of it because they heard about it, and some that visited it. The idea that you could remove the information from the Jedi archive, and it never get replaced there, that no one ever realizes, wait, this is wrong. I think, in theory, if they've got the best maps, you know what I'm doing? If I need a map, I'm asking them for it. And if I'm looking at them like, wait a minute, I know that there's a system missing here. What are you talking about? Our records are perfect. It's like, no, there's a system that's missing there. I've been there. I know a guy. His name is Stu. Great guy. You'd like him. He went to there, right? He's had runs there. That system exists. All right. Do I need to call up Stu? I will bring Stu in here. He'll tell you exactly where it is. You want coordinates? He's got them. It's like, it's an issue with conspiracies in any fiction is you need to make sure that that the conspiracy solves, the conspiracy answers the mysteries, answers the problems, the questions there. Otherwise, the conspiracy cannot last for very long. And this is not a small thing. This is you removing a system that people would be visiting, would be going by. It's dumb. It is dumb. But it's still, I am wondering who they name for who placed the order for the army. Yeah, there's also, well, now I gotta look. It is said that it's in the Outer Rim, which exactly, well, no, beyond the Outer Rim. Beyond the Outer Rim. I have to look at the previous chapter. I'm trying to figure out if it said that Camino is part of the Republic or not. Wait, too far back, right? Nope, not far enough. It's 2 chapters ago, not just one. Okay. We got his Camino Saber Dart. Wonder why it doesn't show up in the archives. It's... Okay. Camino doesn't sound familiar. Is it part of the Republic? No, it's beyond the Outer Rim. Okay. So that would explain the whole, why there wouldn't be senators or something there. But it still is, you would think, even if it isn't part of the Republic, you'd still think you'd have ambassadors and such there. Like, there should also be Camino people around. I mean, it's stupid. It falls apart when you start considering it. One last thing, and this is another one of those, what are you talking about? Set the course to the hyperspace ring R4. Obi-Wan instructed his astromech droid, an R4P unit that was hardwired into the left wing of his sleek starfighter. If it's hardwired in, It's not an astromech droid, it's the ship. It's like it is part of the ship. It's a feature of the ship. It's not like R2 that you can take in and out. It is part of the ship. It is the ship's. I just... It's weird as described. And it's not really much of an astromech droid either. Because, like, R2 has little arms and such and go out and repair things around him. That's how he was introduced in Phantom Menace. He comes out and actually goes and is doing repairs. This thing, it's on the left wing and it can't move. So what happens if there's damage on the right wing? He can't do anything about it. Or is he gonna... Does he have really, really long arms that go out? Or are they just have arms on his side? In which case, then, it's still the whole... No, it's part of the ship. It's a feature of the ship. It's not an astromech droid. It's, like, the astromech feature. And he wouldn't call it separate from the ship. The ship itself should be an R4P. It's just... Well, boat. So, yeah. It's a fighter craft. Actually, that's true. Does it refer to it as a ship? Technically, it shouldn't be. Yes, starfighter. Sorry. I don't remember where it was, but the whole, what's the distinction between a ship and a boat? Well, a boat goes on a ship. Like a lifeboat is something that's on a ship. Ships are big. Yeah, it's just that I'm sorry, it's just, I see that and it's like, no, that isn't how this works. This is dumb. Describe it differently. When there's very technical, pedantic things, but it's triggering for me because it's the technology. That's some of the stuff that I do like. Okay. Wow, this actually ended up being a short one. I wasn't sure if it would be. I am looking forward to when Obi-Wan gets to Kamino, and we get a little bit more like who it is that placed the order when it was. Because it is just... That's a variable that's very important. And also going back a bit with the whole why Dooku left, and combining that with what I was talking about at the end of the previous chapter in the previous video. Padme should be very interested in the negotiations with the Separatists, but we have no information on the negotiations at all. No information why they separated, and why also she's not involved. Because if there's corruption, and that's why we're out, if that's Dooku's view and therefore the Separatist view, she should be like, well, yes, you're right, there is some corruption, but we address it. We need to be within the system to address it. We can't always do that from outside the system. And I could see it even being in Dooku being like, you're very naive, girl. Some of this stuff you can't. Some of the stuff is too deep, too ingrained. You'd have to rip out. Like, it would be like taking out a lung, an entire lung. It's a fundamental portion of the Republic that would have to be taken out, potentially thrown out, or completely changed and put back. But it could still be one of those. She's like, no, I think there's still hope. And just like sort of an acknowledgement between them that she doesn't want to go to that extreme, but she does acknowledge that such extreme measures might be needed. Where it's like, what will be accomplished to achieve all the goals will be between them. Where some things, yes, are achieved within. Some things, no, must be achieved by external pressure and external change, such as, well, we're just going to form our own new republic that fixes this stuff. That's what the Separatists are doing. It's like, you could see something there. It's like, but then it's so much of this relationship you would need to have, her and Dooku, which would actually be really interesting, really fascinating. But we don't get it. Because you could still lead to the war, but you'd be changing things a lot. And one thing, you could not have Dooku as the apprentice to Sidious. That would not make any sense. So, yeah, it just... As it is, I'm not entirely sure how he could be apprenticed to Sidious, because he recognizes Palpatine, and it's like, that's why he left the Republic, is the corruption here. It's like, dude's a freaking Sith, and he's now the Chancellor, the High Chancellor, the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Your point is proven. Why are you leaving? I'm just like, why would you leave for that reason, but then join? That's a complete contradiction with your reason. I don't know. Maybe we will get that explained as we continue. Or maybe it is that it is possible. I mean, I've always interpreted that he is the Sith apprentice, but what if it's actually that he's not? And Palpatine hasn't taken an apprentice, or he's just treating Anakin as his apprentice. And Dooku just sees these things. He knows what's going on better than anyone else, aside from Palpatine, and is trying to disrupt things to potentially limit his power. Only thing is that I know at one point, I mean, it seemed that Palpatine was also in control of the Separatists, which would mean he'd have to be serving Palpatine. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Unless it is we need to reject what Dooku's motivation was. The archivists could be wrong on that. But it's still then why did he leave? In theory, him staying within the Jedi could have been more helpful, because then it's, we can corrupt the Jedi Council as well, not just the Republic, the Senate. So I don't get it. Hopefully it'll be cleared up, but I'll be honest, if it is that he is actually acting more as a third party, and Palpatine is somehow even able to manipulate the Separatists under him, that actually would be really interesting, and could be a very interesting story then. Man, I feel like there is some story that is kind of like that, where it's just as capable, as powerful, as intelligent as Dooku is, Palpatine is still above him, and so you thought you were manipulating things away from me, but no, you've actually still manipulated them towards me because I am at that level. That actually would be really awesome. Would give some redemption to Dooku, but it leads to face other problems. And it would also potentially explain Palpatine having Dooku killed at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, as in the movie, but then Dooku's surprise wouldn't make as much sense, because I always figured that as Dooku being like, well, I'm his apprentice. Wait, you want me dead now? Uh-oh. That doesn't hold up so well anymore. If he is in fact a third player on the board trying to mess things up but failing. Anyhow. See you next time.